to another episode of the CattleUSA Daily Podcast. Today, I want to take a few minutes to dive into something that isn't really easy to talk about in a lot of situations, and I understand that. I absolutely do, but it's also something that, especially as agriculturalists, we need to be much better at, and we need to acknowledge that even though it's hard, we need to do it, and that is succession planning. It's not easy to talk about death. It's not easy to talk about or even think about a point in time where you might not be here. Even if you're in your 20s, 30s, 40s, like that's not easy to talk about. I don't want to sit here and talk with my husband about me potentially dying someday. Like that's not fun, but it's also a necessary thing that you need to be doing for your operations. Succession planning isn't just about like, hey, I'm going to put my will together. It's about like, hey, this is the future that we have here on our operation, and this is how I want my legacy to continue. And it's about empowering your children or your next generation to truly be able to operate and run your operation successfully when you do eventually either hand the reins over to them or when you just like something happens in life, you get old, you pass on, anything like that, they're able to run that successfully and they don't have to also worry about grief and financials and the operation and everything all at the same time. It's a piece of paper, it's an agreement that says, hey, this is the plan if anything happens. It's not fun to sit down and do it, but it is also so necessary to be doing it and to be thinking about it as people in agriculture, especially when we have hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars worth of assets in land, equipment, livestock, crops, whatever it may be. We run really large businesses. And so it's super important that we operate them like businesses in the fact that you have a succession plan in place. And when I say having a succession plan, I don't just mean like, hey, get a will. Yeah, that's really important. But maybe if you run a very large operation, maybe you need to look at getting a trust instead of just a will. Because a will is great, but it's not going to keep your millions of dollars worth of assets out of probate when you die. That's scary. Probate costs a lot of money, y'all. Like a lot of money to get things out of. And also, when things go into probate, you've got holds on assets. You've got there's so many different things that it's impossible to run an operation successfully if everything's just stuck in paperwork. So maybe you need to look at getting a trust set up. It's expensive right now. My family's going through it. We're actively in the process of setting up and reevaluating the trust that we have in place with our operation. Now that my brother and I are older and just looking at kind of what we want our lives to look like, we're reevaluating and getting all of that set up. And I will say it's not cheap, but it is way more cost effective to set up a trust now than it is to pay for probate later. I have a friend that's a lawyer. She has seen all too often probate laws, things in probate, things stuck in probate, all of this other stuff. And she's like, I haven't seen operations get out for less than $10,000 out of probate. And a trust is going to cost you it depends on your operation, but anywhere from $2,000 to $6,000 is what a trust is going to cost. So getting that set up is so vital to do now. And it's not fun to sit down with your kids, sit down with your loved ones, sit down with other people and talk about the potential possibility of you not being here one day. But I will say at the end of those conversations, even though some tears might get shed, some emotions may be had, at the end of those conversations, it's so freeing to be like, now we don't have to worry about it. We've talked about it, we've dealt with it, and now we can just move on. We've got it figured out so that God forbid that day ever happen, it's figured out. And I know for me, as a person who has gotten married recently, set up and in the process of setting up our own personal wills with my husband and I, it's not a fun conversation to have, but it's also very freeing for me as an individual to be like, hey, you know what? I know that if I pass away, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about where things are, all of our assets, who it goes to, all of this stuff, it's taken care of. It's freeing for me as an individual too. So some of you may be listening to this and you may be like, okay, so I'm the individual that needs to get it set up, or I'm the kid of an individual who needs to get it set up. Neither of those are tough. Neither of those are easy situations to be in. They're both tough. But the biggest thing with this is you need to have the conversations. You need to start discussing with your family members, with your loved ones, what is our plan? What is the plan for all of this? And get it in writing. Get it in legal writing, stored away in a good place, online, digitally, paper, all of it. Signed by lawyers, signed by witnesses, all of the stuff. Like, get it all lined out right now, because it's way easier to do it now than it is to be scrambling later. You do not need to be dealing with your grief and with all of the business aspects if someone passes away. And also, this isn't just if someone passes away. A trust and a succession plan and all of that stuff is also really vital for maybe I want to retire someday. Like, maybe I want to go sit on a beach in the Bahamas every once in a while. Like, that also can be what a succession plan looks like. Succession planning is, yes, if I pass away, but also if I want to hand the reins over someday too. And that's also a very vital part that we need to talk about, that succession planning doesn't just have to be, hey, we're going to talk about me dying. It's also like, hey, I'd like to be 80 years old and not maybe be out calving in the middle of winter. Me personally, that's kind of my goal. I don't know about y'all. It's snowing here in Kansas right now. I don't really have any desire to be out there now, let alone when I'm 80 years old. So succession plans can also be, hey, this is kind of like my retirement plan. This is the plan for starting to hand this operation over to that next generation, whether it be a familial succession plan or a non-familial succession plan. What does that look like for you guys? What does your ideal life look like when you're 60, 70, 80 years old? Sit with that. Allow yourself to talk about that. Allow yourself to dream about what do you want your life to look like in a few years, in a decade or so, whatever it may be. Succession planning is not only planning for your eventual passing and getting your trust in order and all of that stuff, but it's also planning for just your future as an individual of, hey, who's going to take over this operation? What do I want it to look like? And then, okay, we're all going to come to the table. This is what I would like it to look like. What do you guys want it to look like? And having those tough conversations, because it's not easy. It's not easy as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, as an individual to think about handing those reins over, but it is also so necessary of a conversation to have for your own mental well-being and then the mental well-being of all of your family members as well. I know it's so freeing for my brother and I to be able to sit down and not have any questions about who's taking the operation over, not have any questions about what our future looks like. And you know what? In 5 years, that's probably going to change. What our plan is right now is probably going to change, and that's okay. That is also a big thing about succession planning and trusts and wills and all of that stuff is you need to be revisiting them. Life changes. My life looks very different now than it did 3 years ago, than it did 5 years ago. My plans look very different now. If you had asked me 6 years ago if I wanted anything to do with our family's operation, I would have laughed in your face. I had no desire to go back to that operation. Absolutely none at all. I went and got a medical degree and didn't want anything to do with having cows. And now, 5 years later, I'm sitting here with my husband and I'm like, yeah, so we're looking at buying land and I want a lot of cows. And so my ideal part of a succession plan for my family's operation looks very different than it did 5 years ago. So I say that in an aspect that it is vital that you are revisiting these. It is vital that as life changes, as kids change, as individuals change, as you change, as life inevitably changes, that you come and you revisit these succession plans, that you revisit these trusts, you revisit these wills, you revisit all of these documents that you have, and just allow yourself to think and dream and plan a little bit outside of just the next couple years. Allow yourself to dream for a little bit. What do you want your future to look like? Do you want to be 80 years old and calving out in the middle of winter? If you do, amazing. I love that for you. But if you don't, if you want to be on a beach in the Bahamas, if you want to be doing XYZ. Like maybe you still want a role in the operation, but you want to have this little piece over here instead of this big piece or something like that. That's okay. That's amazing. I love that for you. Allow yourself to dream. Allow yourself to sit there and be like, what do I want my life to look like when I retire? What do I want my life to look like when my kids are grown and I have grandkids and I want them to take over the operation. What does that look like for me? Allow yourself to sit and think about that. So whether you are a person that needs to get a succession plan in order for your next generation, or you are the next generation and need to have that conversation with your parents, family members, loved ones, aunts, uncles, whoever it may be in your family, I hope that you were able to come to this today to get a little bit of a love slap in the face, loving slap in the face, but that you were also able to come here and get some motivation and some encouragement to go get it done. Don't wait until it's too late, you guys. Seriously, just go do it now. Go have those tough conversations now, because they're not going to get any easier as life continues to go on. And I'm so grateful that my family started having these conversations at a very young age. My dad's dad died when he was 13. So we, for a very long time, have been very familiar with death in our family and the idea of things not going exactly as planned. But it makes it so much easier because we have already talked about it. Now, when we come around and we talk about it once a year or something like that, it's just a nice casual conversation over dinner rather than it having to be this big drawn out thing that it was not comfortable at first, but now it's comfortable in our family. So I hope that you were able to come here today and just get some encouragement, get some, maybe a kick in the butt to go get it done, whatever it may be. I really hope that you were able to walk away from this, and whatever piece of the puzzle you are in your family's operation, that you're able to go back to your other family members, other loved ones, and start having these really vital conversations with them. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to another episode of the CattleUSA Daily Podcast. We will see y'all tomorrow on another episode. I hope you all have a blessed day and that you are staying warm out there in these frigid temperatures that we are seeing across the Midwest right now. Have a good one, y'all. We'll see you later.